seconds here.
Okay. I have, like I say, I have my list sort of coming because it's you know,
Okay. I think we're live now.
So. Oh, hello. Hello, Disturbing.
Well, I just want to make one check before we go. Give me 1 second. Okay, we're good.
Hello, you sound as if you're in a tunnel. Where are you? You're a long way away.
Well,
Yeah.
I was on the other side of the room. So, hello, Mandy Baldwin. Thank you for joining Disturbing Trends.
Hello, Disturbing.
I'm very disturbed right now over a lot of issues that we're going to talk about.
Sure. Yeah.
And I forgot to mention this, but are you okay with having the chat open so people can respond as we're talking?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Try to keep up with it. So I have the chat window. So anyway, so Mandy, we have the Day of Freedom coming up tomorrow in Whitehall, and for some reason, you were banned on Twitter for 7 days.
Yes. It's not the first time. I keep being banned. I keep coming back. But they have sort of gone for it now. It's a 7-day Twitter ban. And obviously, like everyone, I have backups, and they're all banned. And I tried to open a new account, and that was immediately banned. They don't like it, and do you know the thing is, there is this sort of concerted attack on free speech, and it's spearheaded by social media. And the thing is, they'll lose because anyone who does this, anyone who attacks free speech, always loses. And it's a sign of their ignorance that they think this time it will be different. You know, I suppose they don't study history because it might upset them. You know, but we've lost free speech completely. In this country, in Europe as a whole, we've lost free speech. It was given away, and we've now been so long on our knees watching for the thought police. We hardly remember that it should actually be unquestioned, that people can say what they happen to think, that everyone's thoughts are equal, and that nobody has the right to overrule or judge them. I mentioned to you earlier when we were talking about the party I was affiliated to. Well, I was ticked off by them because I called the killers of Chris Donald vermin, and I was told by them to turn it down. And for anyone who doesn't know about Chris Donald, he was a 15-year-old Scottish boy who was abducted by 3 Pakistani men. His eyes were gouged out, he was tortured with knives, he was castrated, and then he was finally burned alive. And the reason being, I can't use the full word, but he was a white C-U-N-T. So vermin for those killers is an understatement, but in the weird world we live in, we're all supposed to consider the feelings of those who think that vermin might deserve respect. So it's a very odd world we live in at the moment.
Well, yeah, there seems to be an overcompensation for the evildoers.
Yeah, I mean but it's not just that. It's quite strange because people have become remarkably humble. They've sort of changed their conceptions of freedom. I mean, this interview in itself is radical, but it shouldn't be, because I mean, I'm not doing anything strange. I'm just talking. Free speech should be exactly that. It should be free. We ran a petition to the government, to the British government, demanding an end to the hate speech laws and the restoration of full free speech. And the government responded that we certainly did have free speech, but that free speech was not an absolute right and could be taken away in the interests of democracy.
Oh.
Yeah, right. Think about that. Think about that.
Well, there should be limits, like screaming, yelling fire in a crowded theater or threatening somebody's life. But
obviously, but not expressing opinion.
We have in the last few centuries since the Enlightenment, we have increased our freedoms decade after decade, and now we're seeing a reversal of that.
Yeah.
And it seems to be the most important element is someone's feelings. And
Yes, interesting you say that. Our police post public threats, and they say, yes, we can say what we like. Because remember, Article 19, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, guarantees that we can say what we like. So yes, we can say what we like, but if they or anyone else judges it to be hateful, we can face prosecution. And in addition, it doesn't matter what we actually say. The Metropolitan Police have stated, get this, that it doesn't matter what we say if someone else perceives what we say to be hateful, even if anyone else would not. It is a hate crime. So you're not saying anything. You could sit there and talk about custard or whatever, and if someone declared that this, was a hate crime, that they felt it to be hateful, that it made them feel whatever, right? It would be a criminal thing. So
what
I could possibly face imprisonment for doing this interview under British law if someone didn't like it. And remember, they're watching me, yeah, because I'm a writer and people don't like writers. But you have to keep speaking out. They're saying we have free speech, so we have to keep proving by putting our words out there and bearing the punishment for it, that we have no free speech. We have to stop toning it down. We have to be loud and proud about it, and then then it challenges them, because what are they going to do? Jail everybody,
Well, it's frightening because you can be as careful as you can, and when you get into gray areas like feelings and offense, be offended, then you could not say anything. We could be talking about a movie or eating at a restaurant, and somebody could be offended by what you say. It's, I mean, that's an extreme, but that's the problem. I see this over and over again, where people are very careful about what they're saying, and because they're still getting their message out, which should be a right, saying what you think without crossing over into something illegal. And yet, if somebody feels offense towards it, we had the Count Dankula issue.
Oh, God, yeah. A dog trained to raise its paw. Do you know, we have to just grow a spine. People, the world does not owe you a lack of offense. It is if you respond at the only thing you should have control over as an individual is your responses to things. That is all you have control over. You shouldn't be trying to control what everybody else is saying, and of course they do this over particular groups. I mean, they do it over Islam, and because they use this whole ethos of we mustn't say anything to offend, they use this to promote one particular religion. And if you remember the words of Voltaire, you just mentioned the Enlightenment. Voltaire said, to learn who rules over you, simply find out who you are not allowed to criticize. We know who we're not allowed to criticize.
I think Voltaire would be Twitter banned today.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, he was jailed anyway. But we are back in the old days. We are back in pre-revolutionary France. We really are. But the thing is, he was able to go to England and speak freely. Now there's no free speech in England. But you have to remember that no government ever gave free speech or democracy. Not ever. These things have always had to be taken. Those who seek to govern us will always be trying to achieve maximum power, and that includes shutting us up. And so it's really, really sickening to see people actively taking pride in shutting down free speech, even if they disagree with people. You should take pride in the very act of freedom. And then you look at Zuckerberg, and Baldwin, I'm sorry, but seriously, he's the personification of those who manage social media, and he's sitting there on a booster seat, facing questions. Seriously, he looked like something that had been prized out of a shell with a pin, right? And you realise...
talking about Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. And there he is on a booster seat. And you realise that these sort of inadequate little shut-ins have been given so much power over communication, which is way beyond their social aptitude, you know? It's ridiculous. And it's funny to see when you finally get them on an open platform like Gab. Do you see these little pod people react when they're on Gab? They start on thinking they can shut people down, and then they panic when they realise that for once they're in something approximating the real world, and the real world despises them, you know? So we have to keep on. We have to keep on taking the flak. We cannot. Every time people tone it down, every time people limit their free speech, every time people collaborate in every way, you know, do you ever read Peter Pan or watch a Peter Pan film?
I have.
Yeah. When they say, every time a child says they don't believe in fairies, then a fairy dies. Well, every time you collude in the silencing, then a bit of your freedom is taken away from you. And, you know, every single time it's chipped away at, you know. You have to keep on demanding it. You have to keep on just taking it as a right, you know.
We see this a lot with university, where university and college campuses were once the hotbed of free speech decades ago, and now they want their freedoms taken away. They demand that the nanny state take over, that the big daddy tell them what they can and can't say, and that's filtering through to when you talk about Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, the media sites, getting banned on Twitter, getting banned on YouTube. It's filtered through the rest of the world. Do you think that's an outgrowth of a generation of professional crybabies?
Yes. It's a sort of trend, and you know,
it's a disturbing trend.
It's very, very disturbing. It's very, very disturbing. I mean, it happens here as well, but I don't know why, but it's particularly sad to see it happen in America. I mean, especially as in America, you don't really have any sort of cool left-wing figures. You got Hillary Clinton. And you had this thing, you know, where supposedly school kids were saying, no, we don't want guns, no, we don't. Oh, come off it. Just stop being such a, you know, stop being so pathetic, you know.
We were talking about left wing versus right wing and the history of it earlier. And you meant, I don't know if you wanted to re-mention for the YouTube audience the history of that.
Yeah, it means nothing. Left wing, right wing. Look, in the pre-revolutionary France, there was a Senate in France, and on the right hand of the building sat the aristocrats, and on the left wing of the left side of the building sat the commoners. That's where it springs from. They were neither particularly nice nor particularly nasty. That's just where it sprang from. So to see people adopt this left-wing, right-wing stance is just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. It means nothing. And I was sort of watching the gun thing unfold in America was just outrageous, because you saw these kids. What are they like? Why are they so downtrodden by these really boring people? Look, this would be my message to young Americans, right? When you allow your left-wing teachers to bully you into supporting their political fetishes, this is not edgy. This is not cool. It's not radical. It's really pathetic. If you've ever been called to the principal's office, you've seen Hillary Clinton's face glaring at you across that desk. That face is universal. That face glares across a desk at kids the world over, right? And that face embodies bullying and corruption of power. There's nothing radical about following a demented old biddy who procured young interns for her pervy husband to use as cigar storage units. In fact, it's really creepy. It's really, really creepy. So stop it. Stop it.
So I take it you're not a fan of Hillary Clinton.
I'm not. God, no, my God, she's got the most slappable face in world politics. Stop it. Stop.
Well, she is considered a corporate Democrat, even by the Democrats.
I have no idea what that means. To me, as an English person, she's a pain in the arse. But anyway, so just stop being shills for people who are themselves shills of a corrupt establishment singing from an early 20th century song sheet. Just stop it. Stop being so stupid. You know, compared to my country, America is young, right? But American roots do go deep, because America was born out of an idea of freedom, which is universal and timeless. And that idea sprang from rebelling against the corrupt establishment, not groveling to it. So, and that's how America has been the light of the world. You know, the world is a dark place right now. We all have to find the courage to defend our heritage, because the alternative is too horrendous to contemplate. You don't defend your heritage by meekly trotting behind Hillary Clinton. Yet when history is written, the names of those who betray their heritage will always live in infamy. So, you know, just remember who you are, and it's not Hillary Clinton. You know, just it's Hillary Clinton and the current crop of Democrats are an aberration. They're anti-American. You know, honor your past so you can defend your future, and be proud of the idea which fathered the land that birthed you. Love the land of the free, the home of the brave, and act accordingly. Don't follow your teachers in banning guns. It's just mad, you know. Just it's so pathetic.
So that's coming from somebody who lives in a country with massive gun laws against carrying guns.
Yeah, we do now. It's coming from a country where we're actually now trying to get back our right to defend ourselves.
What about carrying knives in London?
Oh yeah, exactly. The lives that would be saved if we had retained our right. You get that Second Amendment. You get that right from us. That is actually in Magna Carta. That is part of our heritage, which we've had taken away from us. Don't let it be taken away from you, because once it's gone forever. And there are people who would be alive today if the good guys were able to carry, and we're not. So
you mentioned Katie Hopkins earlier, and you also
and she's marvelous.
And
yeah,
she's a big fan of Donald Trump, and I take it you are too. Explain to me why people in Britain are. I know there are some in London that aren't fans and they don't want to visit, but explain why you. Well, we've heard what you think about Hillary Clinton, but explain the Trump thing.
Do pass that on to her. Donald Trump, he's fantastic. He's hilarious for a start. He's let's face it, he's richer than God. He doesn't care. He's incorruptible, and he is entirely He does what presidents are supposed to do. He looks after his own. He's supposed to be a father of the nation, and that's what he acts like. And he's so big and bold and brave and in your face, and it's marvelous. And he gives us hope. He really does. I mean, we love Trump. There's been a group, Britons for Trump, ever since he was elected. And in fact, a survey taken here, I think it was a YouGov survey or something, taken here a couple of months back, found that 87% of Brits would rather have Trump in number 10 than that gurgling, quizzling Theresa May. Mind you,
isn't she a conservative?
She's a cretin. She's nominally a conservative. She's
right.
A quizzler. She's a Remainer. She's pro EU. I mean, the thing is, you know, we couldn't have a more embarrassing prime minister unless someone gave the job to a balloon animal. You know, she's so embarrassing. So we love Trump, and Sadbeat Kant is trying to he's trying to whip up protests about Trump's visit on the 13th of July. And the people who support the Fourth Reich, EU and globalism and stuff and hate democracy will turn up. They'll squeal about the elected president of America. Of course, they'll say nothing about any number of Asian despots or Arab savages being given the red carpet treatment. So that just about sums up the level of hypocrisy that we're dealing with here. But I should tell you, the biggest anti-Trump the biggest anti-Trump protest group so far seems to be a couple of hundred drag queens. And meanwhile, in the pro-Trump corner are the Football Lads Alliance and the military veterans. So good luck with that, sweetie pies. You know, there's going to be false eyelashes all over the place. Anyway, you know, the anti-Trump brigade are constantly trying to make people swoon with outrage and failing, and it just gets funnier and funnier. I mean, what is her name? Stormy Daniels something? So, rich man bought prostitute. Well, ooh, whoopie-doo. You know, who'd have thought it? Who cares as long as she got paid? Nobody cares. Then there's the other thing about were they on a coach or something, or on a bus or something? Two men privately talk about grabbing pussies. Well, wow! Imagine my shock. You know, men have never talked about grabbing pussies.
No, we don't.
No, never do. You never talk about pussies. You never ever do. I know this.
Doesn't come up.
No, the subject never arises. You leave two men alone with a couple of beers, right? I'm thinking they're undisturbed, and they will never ever talk about pussy. That's so, you know, clearly the man should be shot at dawn. But anyway, we love Trump, so you know, and they can throw anything, you know, anything about any accusation at him, and we'll still love him. So, and which is why when he's interviewed about Britain, he's always grinning like a Cheshire cat, because he knows we love him. So, you know, and he'll get the red carpet treatment.
And I hear one in the background.
That's a cat.
Yes.
That's a cat. Yeah, that's a cat. Yeah. A cat called Orson Welles, but let's not talk about that. On the subject of President Khan, could I urge all your listeners, take every opportunity to call Sadiq Khan a pigeon. Tell him he looks like a pigeon, because he considers this to be a hate crime. And he has taken nearly 1,000 metropolitan police away from the vital task of ending the bloodbath which our capital city has been reduced to, and he's put them onto hurty tweet duty. And he was in Austin and in Texas. I don't know why Texas let him in. They must have been mad. What's the matter with them? Anyway, he was blubbering because people told him he looked like a pigeon. So I urge everyone to blow his tiny little mind by telling him he looks like a pigeon.
So you hear that? We have an imperative from Mandy. Well, here you brought up the Twitter police.
Oh yeah.
And we're scratching our heads and rubbing our eyes over here, like trying to fathom that. Countries have, you know, like we have the CIA and the FBI and everything, but Twitter police.
Mhm. Oh yeah.
It's just mind blowing that there's actually, and forget about the obvious that they're not patrolling the streets and keeping real crimes from happening, but they're actually looking for people saying naughty stuff.
Yeah.
And is that mainly geared towards saying stuff towards Islam, or is it anything politically incorrect?
It's mainly about Islam. It's mainly about Islam.
Why is the British government set on protecting like an endangered species?
Well, that's quite. To give you a few cases, right? We have a situation here basically where anything a Muslim might find offensive is illegal. For instance, recently a man in Bristol was jailed for a year for putting bacon on a door handle and a St George's flag the St George flag is the English flag, right, as opposed to the Union Jack, on a gate. These things are not crimes, and they shouldn't be crimes in England, certainly, because you know, anyone who finds the national breakfast and the national flag offensive should go and live elsewhere, you know. Anyway, he had a totally clean record otherwise, but he was jailed for a year for what the judge called an attack on England, because that door handle was a mosque door handle, and that gate was the gate to a mosque. And soon afterwards, he died in suspicious circumstances in prison, a healthy 33-year-old man. The authorities keep trying to hush this up, but we know from what's happened to Paul Golding and Tommy Robinson and others, the prison governors allow Muslim prisoners access to those who are jailed for offending Muslims. Why should anyone be jailed for that? This is nonsense, right? This is a year in prison for no crime, where there's 3 or 5 years in prison for Muslims who gang rape little British girls. The rape holocaust enabled by successive governments. And the thing is, I actually blame the enabling authorities more than I blame the Muslims, you know, because they're just doing their Muslim thing, which always will be, it always was and always will be, arrive in small numbers, make loud noises, arrive in even greater numbers, become objectionable, play the victim, drive everyone insane, try to take over, and then get kicked out. That's what Muslims do in Europe. That's always happened, you know.
Well, here's the thing in the West, in the U.S., Europe, Muslims are a minority. Okay, so for now, and so there's this mindset they're a minority, but there's what's the last count? 1.6 billion Muslims in the world. That's hardly a minority.
Yeah,
it's a minority in Western countries, and so they're treated like an endangered species, or they have to be protected. Whereas there's immigrants from all over the world that there's less of a population in these countries that don't have the same protections.
Yeah, because but there's a different agenda. I mean, I don't know the agenda in America, right? But and this is what I'm saying. I blame Muslims are Muslims, and they do their Muslim thing, yeah, and they haven't advanced Islam hasn't advanced in 1,000 years, and so you blame them to act, you know, if you blame them for acting true to type, it's like blaming a dog for barking. What we have now are governments in Europe, certainly, which is all I can speak for, with an agenda. They're trying to force us to accept a culture which is totally incompatible with all we hold dear, right? And
it seems obvious, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I would suggest to anyone who's interested in the details, Google Barcelona 1995, which was when an agreement was signed recurring to the EU, which is like the source of all evil. There was an agreement signed whereby North Africa was going to be merged with Europe. And that involved, basically, rather than sending Europeans out to North Africa, it was going to involve sending North Africans into Europe, which, from the point of view of despots, makes a lot of sense, because the EU are intrinsically anti-democratic, you know, and if you're an anti-democratic person, or you know, or group, what are you going to want? Are you going to want difficult people who nail protester church doors and behead inconvenient kings and, you know, storm the Bastille and stuff? Or are you going to want people who are terrified of free speech and democracy and can be controlled with a call to prayer? You know, you're going to want the latter, aren't you? Do you know what I mean? You're going to want Muslims.
That's a direct tie into the Brexit issue. When you say it's anti-democratic, because the British want to control their own borders, correct?
Yeah. The EU is astonishing. It really is. The EU is. It's very, very easy to just say that, oh, someone's anti-democratic, but the EU really is anti-democratic. There's an EU Parliament, just for the people who don't know anything at all about the EU. there is an EU Parliament, but MEPs, members of European Parliament, exist only to rubber stamp laws which are passed down by 4 unelected presidents to unelected commissioners who debate those laws in secret and present them to the MEPs for voting. And if the wrong response is given, they're made to vote again and again and again until they get the right response, which is precisely what they want us to do with Brexit. These Remainers saying, oh, we want another vote. No, you don't. You get 1 vote and that's the end of it. Tough, right? MEPs aren't like MPs are in British Parliament. They cannot propose or change any law. The EU was begun by festering old Nazis like Hallstein. I don't know if you've heard of Hallstein. He was the architect of the European Commission as a form of government, and he was the first president of the European Commission. He was also the lawyer, the Nazi lawyer, who drafted the blood and honor sections of the Nuremberg laws. He legitimized the Holocaust. We are talking serious stuff here, right? And naturally, such people love the idea of a huge borderless Europe under German control, right? Because we're singing from a very old song sheet here. The EU is best loved by people like Merkel. Merkel is a dyed-in-the-wool communist. She was an Eastern European. You cannot get that out of somebody's heads when they've been in that until their 30s. She would have joined the Politburo if it hadn't been snatched away from her. Juncker, Jean-Claude Juncker, who is one of the 4 presidents, said there can be no democratic choice against EU treaties. And Martin Schulz, who is another one of the presidents, said about Brexit, the British, now get this, think about this as a person from a traditionally democratic nation. He said about Brexit, the British have violated the rules. It is not EU philosophy that the crowd can decide its fate. This is what we are fighting for our survival. This is not something to be taken. You see Brexit lightly mentioned in the news, and it's all that ongoing debate. We're fighting for our lives. We are fighting for the existence of our country. This is the second battle of Britain, and it's bloody serious. What they've done, what they failed to do with tanks, they're trying to do with banks, and it's very, very serious. And this is one of the reasons why the globalists hate Trump, because Trump is violently opposed to the EU. So, he really is, and so he's our friend.
So tell me about common purpose.
Oh, common purpose. Common purpose is registered as a charity. It's actually funded by Deutsche Bank. I'll leave you to guess where that originates from, Deutsche Bank, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, most organizations are staffed and led by common purpose trained individuals, and they refuse to employ anyone who's not. And what they basically create is this sort of weird, neutering insanity that undermines national interests and morale. So, for instance, this is going to sound a small thing, but it's not. We have, obviously, we're an island nation. Very important to our country are the lifeboats, that go out and save people at sea and all the rest of it. They've just dismissed an entire crew because they had... because according to the common purpose higher management of the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, some of the lifeboat men had owned a mug that had a naked woman on it. Right? So it's this insane destruction of national morale and undermining things. It's now...
Is it a tie into multiculturalism?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's now legal in the UK for white Britons to be very specifically excluded from applications for jobs, training and funding. They can actually say no white Britons need apply. Black or Asian minority ethnic groups only. And complaints about this are treated as hate crime. Oh. Right? Yes. Even our history is being rewritten. There's an organisation, Historic England, which refuses to employ any white English people.
Is that wasn't there an issue a couple months ago with the BBC doing just that?
Yep. All major organisations do it. All major organisations do it. And if they're publicly funded, right? Historic England is an organisation which is supposed to preserve our, our heritage and all the rest of it, and buildings, and they refuse to employ anyone who is ethnic English. They're Historic England. And they now have a huge spread. Their thing that they're focusing on now is our Islamic heritage. We don't have an Islamic heritage.
Well, that's right. The Queen is related to the Prophet Muhammad, isn't she? We just found that out.
God knows who she's related to, but we don't know. I tell you what, we do not have an Islamic heritage. We do not. End of. We do not have it, right? And
now you don't.
Yeah, they'll try and convince us that we do. The House of Lords. I mean, the House of Lords shouldn't exist anyway because it's mad. But it's now not. Tony Blair came to power based on the fact that he said he was going to abolish the House of Lords, what he did was he dismissed the aristocrats who used to turn up and go to sleep there once a month or so, and he stocked it with political hangers-on. So now we have parties which are not elected who have lords, in inverted commas, put in there, who fight their corner and actually block democratic choices made by elected MPs. And into the bargain, most of these lords have signed an agreement with the EU to promote the interests of the EU, and if not, they will lose vast EU pensions, which are paid by the British.
They're the unelected peers, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
And they have a lifetime position in Parliament.
Yep, totally unelected. They are the House of Evil Santas, and they really have to go. They really do have to go. Have to go. They have to go to the extent of turning a high pressure hose on them. The vermin in ermine have to go. I do see the EU as the source of the poison because they are so corrupt. The EU is so corrupt. The facts about the EU sound like tinfoil hat country. And standing at the top of the pile, the whole pile of EU poop, is Angela Merkel, who is completely raving mad. I mean, in the wake of her inviting a vast army of unknown African migrants into Germany, she told Germans that if they didn't like her policies, they'd have to leave the country. You can't say to Germans, you've got to leave Germany if you don't like what I say. I mean, seriously. The Germans seem to be going for the hat trick, producing 3 insane leaders to destroy Europe 3 times in 1 century. It's really something they're doing here, This is a woman who, against all advice from those who were monitoring the situation, she demanded that an invasion force was allowed to pour in to undefended, unarmed, borderless Europe. And she assumed that she'd be able to offload them onto neighbouring countries. As it is, they've said no and put the walls back up. And she runs the EU as a personal Reich, and it's now threatening military action against nations which refuse to comply with their own destruction, using a military which the EU denied even planning 2 years ago during the Brexit campaign. We were told, those of us who suspected were told that when we said, look, they are planning a military, they are militarizing, were told, we were fantasizing, this was insane. Well, they're now threatening military action, and they have to be stopped. They have to be stopped.
Germany or the EU?
The EU, but they're indivisible. Although it has to be said, ordinary Germans do not go along with this. Martin Schulz, who is a German EU president, actually said to them, announced that there must be a federal Europe and blah, blah, blah. And Germans just rolled around laughing. They're not interested in the Fourth Reich. It is not 1929, right? And which is something that the leaders of the EU seem to forget. Meanwhile, right, we've got millions of Africans pouring into Europe.
They're children, of course, right?
Oh, yeah.
Children.
Thousands.
With beards.
With beards. Thousands are daily trying to make it to the UK. These are not refugees. I have the official figures here. 75% of them are healthy males aged 18 to 45. 13% are women in the same age group, and 12% are children. And when I say children, 12% are children. 12% claim to be children, because actually the majority of that 12% are proven to be adults. 8% of the whole are known ISIS operatives, and only 20% of them have ever been anywhere near a war zone. These are the demographics of an invasion, not a humanitarian crisis. This is a Trojan horse, and we all know it. And we get these left-wing, I'm sorry, I'm going to use the word again because that's how they call them, what they call themselves, celebrities who demand that we take in refugees, and then
progressives.
Yeah. No, that is the worst possible word from. J.K. Rowling is a particular offender. She sits in she is a billionaire sitting in a treehouse writing about wizards, with 18 spare bedrooms, not one of which has ever sheltered a refugee, demanding that the nation take in more and more of these rapists and murderers, right? And, you know, all the funding, while she sits there quietly thinking whatever she's thinking, all funding for this is supposed to be taken from the poor, who must then suffer the consequences of the invasion. And because the wealthy, culturally compatible Gulf states don't take them in.
Well,
I mean, the South.
Can I interject here? So, because this is something that I'm a little confused about, is when you talk about the poor, they are paying a price, because I don't know if it's a national issue or an EU issue, that these immigrants come in, they get a stipend, or they get they get a place to live, they get
Absolutely.
Yeah. So is that an EU thing, or is that?
It's EU wide, but I'm talking specifically in Britain. We have 9,000. We have 9,000 military veterans sleeping on the streets,
right?
And someone can waltz in and, you know, claim to be an asylum seeker and instantly be given a home and be kept, courtesy of the state. All found, courtesy of the state, right? And you know, it's insane. It's insane, and these people hate us. And there's lies told about. I mean, you know, that across Europe, like the Saudi head choppers, they won't take anyone in. They don't take anyone in. But what they have done is promise to build a mosque in every town in Europe that the refugees are sent to. Now, mosque is an occupation headquarters. Even moderate Muslims say that all Saudi-funded mosques should be shut down because they're training grounds. And typical of that attitude, that a mosque is a sign of conquest, is, you know, they tried to build a mosque on ground zero after 9/11. You know, this is how they think. But our government are actually against us. They don't. A government should surely try to protect its own people. Each time there's been an atrocity carried out by Muslims, the Prime Minister has stood outside Number 10, devoting one sentence to how terrible the atrocity is, and 10 lines to how much the Muslim community give to us, and then warning us that there must not be a backlash. Well, we now have bollards in the streets outside churches decorated at Christmas, so that these savages can't mow us down in cars or vans or whatever, which is what they like to do. We're betrayed on all sides, because leading churchmen, I mean, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Pope, both grovel to Islam and Muslims. You know, the old saying, is the Pope a Catholic? Is the Pope Catholic? Well, no, he's not, because he's groveling to Muslims. They doubt, and now it's got old, and our government don't even call terrorist attacks terrorism. There was one a couple of months back, who they described as a Surrey teenager. He was actually from Iraq and had posed as a child and wasn't a child. And he'd been placed with an elderly couple of foster parents. he planted a bomb on a train to attempt to bomb school children. It was a train that, you know, contained school children. This wasn't called terrorism. This was called attempted murder. And when people expressed how angry they were at this, you know, this creature
by an Asian man, right?
No, he was a Surrey teenager.
Okay. Oh, right.
Surrey teenager.
Not in this case, yeah.
No, he was a Surrey. He was an Iraqi who'd arrived in the back of a truck illegally, right? But he was described as a Surrey teenager. When people were understandably angry that this Iraqi illegal immigrant had tried to burn their children's faces off, Theresa May threatened to come down harder on Islamophobia. Now, a phobia is an irrational fear, and I think that if people keep trying to get into your country so that they can torch your children, then that isn't irrational. It's not irrational to be afraid of that, right? But our government have weird ideas. I've proposed something called British Martyrs' Day on the 22nd of May, which is the anniversary of Lee Reed's murder. As a day to publicly name and mourn the martyrs to Islamist terrorism in Britain. And this is very popular. This is a very popular idea. 22nd of May, British Martyrs' Day, because after all, they are all martyrs to British government's immigration policies and refusal to keep us safe. I invited the government to join us in mourning, and they actually said that commemorating our dead is extreme. What can you do with a government that says that commemorating your dead is extreme? You know, our children are in danger.
Well, you can change it, and tell us about the parties that are against the inrush of immigration into the UK, and how they're doing.
Badly, because Labour love it. They would. Labour won't be happy until we're actually an Islamic country. The Conservatives they acquiesce. They say they don't, but they do. UKIP and For Britain, the Greens are insane. I think Greens are the party of care in the community,
right.
And UKIP and For Britain seem to be just scratching each other's eyes out. So we don't have anything that will actually deal with it. For Britain said they do, but like I say, when you know that we were in the event, we were told to tone down our language rather than offend people who presume.
So is that because when you criticize an ideology, you're racist and you have to tone that down?
No, I was told, and I have the emails to prove it, that it was in order to catch left-wing votes.
Oh, okay.
So we don't really have anyone who is effective. UKIP started off as effective, but decided that they would ban anyone who was anti-Islamic. So we don't really have anyone. We're utterly defenseless, and yet everyone is angry about it. And it's quite a bizarre situation, you know, because everybody knows who the enemy are.
And we talked about that earlier, and so what happens is, I guess probably you and Tommy Robinson and others get branded racist by being against an ideology. You don't, to be straight, you're not against individual people just because of where they come from or how they identify. You're against the ideology behind it, right?
No, absolutely not.
Forget about the fact that Islam is not a race. And that's just ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely not. In fact, I used to back in my wild youth, I used to get into trouble for opposing National Front marches and everything. I don't see that race is at all relevant to people's value as a human, and it really angers me that opposition to a very, very intolerant cult is named as intolerance. You know, because we have to preserve our tolerance.
Well, Islam is a religion of peace because once they take over your country, you won't be fighting them. They'll be in control, right?
Islam means surrender. Let's name.
Yes.
Let's go. You know, Islam is Arabic.
Submission. It means submission, right?
Yeah, submission. Yeah.
So once they take over, then it will be the religion of peace, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. Which is why our governments like it so much. Because, like I say, you're talking about Europeans are very, very difficult people. We're if you think about all the most radical ideologies and the most rebellions and the most bizarre off the wall ideas and all the rest of it, they all stem from Europe. We are very, very radical people, and they would much prefer that we were replaced with servile people. They really would much prefer that we were replaced with servile people, because let's face it, 5 calls to prayer a day and the occasional hail of bullets, and you got everyone shut up. You know.
You mentioned earlier about I think you had mentioned immigration into England, UK, and you know, I don't know how it is in America, but here, people on the far left, people that identify as LGBT, and a lot of identifications that would likely be instant death if they were in some countries in the Middle East just for existing. The people that are not religious, people that are the transgender, you know, the entire spectrum on the left is probably the biggest defenders of the ideology of Islam, which is ironic.
Yeah, no, it's not ironic. It's because they're mentally ill. I'm sorry. If you are LGBT and you support Islam, then you are mentally ill. There is no, because they want to kill you. They want to kill you. You know, last week, 52% of British Muslims declared that they think all gays should be dead. They do not. They are.
And by saying that, you're an extremist, right?
I don't give it. No, I'm an honest person.
Right? Exactly.
I'm past caring. I'm sane and I'm honest. I'm past caring about you know, pandering to the mentally ill. If you're a gay person and you support Islam, and I mean, you know, if you're a gay person and you don't actively seek to eradicate Islam in your homeland, then you are suicidal. There are no half measures. They want you gone. Islam wants gays gone.
I'm a fan of Red Dwarf, the TV series. And are you familiar with it?
Yeah.
And Lister says they're being led like lambs to the kebab shop.
Yeah.
Well, not them, but I'm just misquoting him.
Voting for Christmas. It's absolutely insane. And what it is that they are playing at life. Because they take their protest to Saudi Arabia. Go on, take their protest to Riyadh and see what happens. You know, it's absolutely insane. And you get people who do this, who actually are so detached from reality that all they can see is, I'm a minority and that minority, no, they're minority. Just these people want to kill them. Get over it. They want to kill them. So don't stand by their side. Don't stand by their side, because they're not going to stand by the side of gays. They're going to throw gays off a tall building.
So that's okay. So let's put a fine point on this. It's not somebody, a Muslim family in the English countryside or in Texas in the U.S. It's an actual country with Sharia law would do this.
Yeah. So you don't want Sharia law. Just, you know, you must be against Sharia because for one thing, it's not our law, and there should be a single cohesive law within a nation. And for another thing, under Sharia law, they're dead. So, you know, just.
Can I ask about that in the UK? where is Sharia law now? We hear about the Sharia courts, and
Mm,
it can be is it recognized by the government?
not officially, but neither is it actually suppressed. Neither is actually
So if you
suppressed.
have say a woman that's goes to a Sharia court because of her husband, and she's being she's not being given the rights that are afforded to people in the UK, correct?
Yeah. Above all, the rights of Muslim people are not properly defended by British courts, which are so concerned with grovelling to Sharia. Um, I had a very dear friend, very dear Muslim friend, whose daughters were best friends of my little girl, and she was very, very unhappy. Her husband was violent, and she was very, very unhappy, and she asked me, how do I get a divorce? How do I, she was 2 years out of Pakistan. She said, how do I get a divorce? How do I get a divorce? And I explained to her, and it was all very, very complex. And I said, look, I'll help you. And she said, you would be in danger. And then she said, I'm so unhappy. I look well on the inside, on the outside, but inside, I'm so unhappy inside. I'm ill, but God will help me. God will help me. And she began going veiled because her husband broke her nose. Because we used to do the normal mum thing, go and have a cup of tea together after picking the kids up from school. And then she disappeared. Her and her two daughters, they just disappeared. And nobody knew where they'd gone. And I reported them to the police. And they said, well, it's a local cultural matter. This was a woman in her 30s, and two little girls had disappeared. Whether they'd been sent back to Pakistan to be dealt with as rebellious females, I don't know, but there was no assistance in finding out what had happened to them. There are atrocities being covered up in deference to Islam. And it was 20 years ago, but my friend Nyla still haunts me because, sorry, I don't know what happened to her. I don't know what happened to her or her daughters. And I was warned off finding out. Because they prefer to pretend, and they prefer to cover up, and they prefer to act as if everything's happy in the multicultural garden. But Pakistan is a very brutal, nasty place, and we should not be welcoming immigrants from Pakistan. You know, last year there were, in one single town in Pakistan, there were nearly 400 corpses of newborn baby girls found dumped in the street as garbage in one town in Pakistan. This is not a culture which enriches anywhere, and we're importing it, and we're defending it, and we're covering its tracks. And I want that ended. I want that ended for the sake of everybody, because there are people on all sides suffering here, and they're being sacrificed to a god called multiculturalism, and which doesn't work. And it's nothing to do with being racist, because I don't care what colour somebody is. I honestly don't care. What I do care is that people are treated well, and you don't treat people well by enabling a barbaric culture.
Well,
And
what you're bringing to our attention is the fact that most victims of Islam are themselves Islamic.
I wouldn't say most, but I'd say equal numbers. It's a cruel cult, and people aren't being defended against it. You know, little girls who they know have been subject to FGM are forced to return to live with their parents. The parents who've done this to them. Can you imagine? Can you imagine what this does to a kid?
No, I can't imagine.
Right? This. But they should. Those parents should never see the light of day again, and they should never see their children again. How can they do that? But people are far more concerned with towing some twisted, politically correct line, and than they are with the rights of human beings or the rights of children. For crying out loud, I'm a mum. You don't abuse children and then defend it on grounds of some kind of ideology. You just don't. And we have to reach a stage where universal human rights are put above the rights of a particular ideology or a social experiment, which multiculturalism is.
What would happen to say if that happened in a Christian home? Those issues.
Oh, they'd never see their child again. They'd never see their child again. But it wouldn't happen because, let's face it, it would be treated as with FGM. The bizarre thing is, it's not treated as child abuse. It's treated as
cultural.
Yeah. And I would refer anyone to Shazia Hobbs for that, who's been permanently banned by Twitter for speaking out about FGM. And she's a Scottish ex-Muslim Pakistani. She's absolutely fantastic. She's one of my heroes. But she's permanently banned by Twitter because she speaks the truth. And she said it's not instead of it being classified as child abuse, it comes under a different heading, and you're talking child abuse.
It's a human rights issue.
Yes. So why is this dealt with? If someone from any other culture decided to slice and dice their little girl's genitals with a razor, they treat it as child abuse. But because they then say, "Oh no, I'm a Muslim," it's treated as some kind of cultural issue. It's disgusting.
And child marriages, the same thing.
Oh, the same thing. I know that I've seen kids being groomed for this, and nothing is done. Nothing is done about it.
Well, the one point about that is when you use cultural as an excuse for barbaric way of life, it doesn't say much about the culture, does it?
No, exactly. Not all cultures are equal. People are born. This is my opinion anyway, and I'm not interested in what anyone else thinks about it because it's in my head and I have to live with it.
Well, you're not saying when you say that, you're not saying all one's better than the other. You're just saying they're not the same, correct?
No, I'm saying some cultures are better than others.
Oh, okay, you are.
Yeah, I am saying. I'm saying racially. I'm saying that racially there is no. I get very, very tired of people talking about race because, to my mind, there is no some kind of racial definition. It doesn't define someone as a person. It doesn't impact upon their value as a person, or their intelligence, or their abilities, or their value in any way whatsoever. But their culture does. Culture is another thing altogether, and
it's chosen. It's chosen.
Exactly.
You were born as a certain race. You don't choose it.
What does it matter? It doesn't bloody matter. Most of us, we don't know. Have you got a DNA test? Who cares? Who cares? Is what you behave like, what you are, what you do, right? And you cannot compare. You cannot say that a culture which idolizes a dead paedophile warlord as equal to a culture which values free speech, democracy, equality, liberty, right? You cannot say that they are equal cultures. These are not equal cultures. And even if anyone were to argue that they are not, that they are equal cultures, which they're not, which would be an erroneous argument, we don't like them. we don't like having a culture foisted on us which sees women as easy meat, which sees unbelievers as unclean, which says that animals should be tortured to death, which says that little girls should have their clitorises sliced off. We don't like it. We don't like it, and we have every right not to like it. And the reason we don't like it is that it's inferior and it's objectionable. But they cannot argue that all cultures are compatible, because Islam is totally incompatible with the West. And to go right back to the beginning, the history of the relationship between Islam and Christendom is one of Islam constantly trying to encroach, as they did during the Crusades, starting way back then. Islam constantly tries to encroach and is expelled. You try to get on with them because they serve certain purposes and they trade and blah, 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 and then they're expelled. That is the history of Islam and Christianity.
Well, that's what a lot of people don't understand, is that Islam is an imperialist ideology.
Is proselytizing. Something I really don't understand is anti-Semitism. I honestly don't, because I don't care how many silly hats someone wears. I don't care what they do. I don't care as long as they don't try and bully me. Jews don't try and bully anyone. They're not a proselytizing faith. They just want to be left on their own to do their own thing and think their own stuff and behave as their own. I'm fine with that. I don't care what anybody else does. Islam is a cuckoo faith. Islam, I don't know if you know about, the cuckoo bird. I don't know if you got it that side of the pond. It's a cuckoo is a bird which lays its eggs
in another nest.
Yeah.
The other birds raise the cuckoo, and they push the other eggs out.
Exactly.
Right.
And Islam is a cuckoo faith, right? It lays its eggs in other people's nests, and then it drives out, it kicks out the young.
Is that what you were talking about when you mentioned a Trojan horse?
Yeah, same thing. And Islam is not a faith which coexists with anybody. They've even reduced Buddhist monks carry a net to filter their water in case they swallow a fly. They're the most peaceful people on earth. They're suicidally peaceful. But who was it? Was it? Oh God!
I think you meant the Jainists, right?
No, Buddhists.
Okay.
One of them said you can be as peaceful as you like, but you cannot sleep with a mad dog. Islam is so imperious and so controlling and so aggressive that it reduces it to a case of them or us. And it would be helped if in our country in our countries, I speak Britain and the rest of Europe, if they enforced our laws. But there is a definite policy of not enforcing our laws. And we've actually sort of gone through the looking glass. Somebody said to me today, we've gone through the looking glass, because if we don't actively support Islam, which was Hitler's favourite religion, Nazis, and it's just insane. There is no way you should be called intolerant for disliking the most intolerant cult in the world, but we are.
I agree.
And I don't know.
So can we talk about? I don't think we talked about the Day of Freedom in Whitehall tomorrow.
Yes. Yeah. Well, there should be about 70,000 people apparently.
I think we did talk about this, and it's because of things like Tommy Robinson being permanently banned on Twitter.
Mm-hmm. And Shazia Hobbs has also been permanently banned. Anyone who offends against Islam is permanently banned, basically. These people dislike free speech altogether, and the thing is with these movements, everybody is on board with them, because everybody wants free speech. Apart from Muslims, they are terrified of free speech, because they depend on there not being free speech. But everybody else is into free speech.
Almost everybody else. On the left, we don't want it anymore.
The left is, yeah, but we're talking, care in the community ground there. It's the left is. I don't know what the left wants. They're certainly not radical. They don't want free speech at all. Yeah. Okay, but everybody else, right, wants free speech. Most people want free speech. And it'll be interesting to see how the mainstream media ignore it, because, for instance, they ignored the BBC ignored 20,000 men surrounding BBC headquarters. They didn't report it. It doesn't matter what anybody does. They pretend it doesn't happen.
We have that here, where there'll be the largest protest against something, and it won't be on the major networks. So we've come to rely on things like YouTube.
Yeah.
You can't. Well, YouTube is trying, but at the time, I took my camcorder out to events and rallies, and then would upload the videos, because people would comment they didn't know anything about it, and there would be thousands of people at these events.
Yeah.
Whatever the cause, whatever, left, right, whatever.
Yes, but the same weekend that 20,000 men surrounded BBC headquarters, BBC reported endlessly on about 300 people holding an anti-Brexit demonstration. We have no honest reporting now. The very basis of reporting, which is that it must be edgy and it must be honest, has gone. Now it is to be conformist, which is why I was sort of made this thing to your young, don't be conformist, be edgy, because that's how you make progress.
There is a movement in Canada and US right now, and you're probably
there's movement in Canada. There's movement in Canada. What? Well, even under Trudeau? Trudeau's movement?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Well, they're not real happy with Trudeau, but we have. You're familiar with Jordan Peterson, of course, right?
Oh, he's brilliant, yeah.
A few years ago, was an unknown psychology professor in Ontario, and now he's a rock star. He has a best-selling book.
He's fantastic.
I saw him talk in Toronto, and the reason I bring that up is that there's this movement of against people trying to keep our free speech away. And the first few events, there were conservatives that they were violently shut down. They use all kinds of tricks, like pull the fire alarm or make it unsafe for people, and they end up having to shut it down. Security is afraid to stop them because they'll be called racist or something. And but the movement's picking up steam, and I think it's picking up in Europe too. And there are countries that the ideology of Islam it's Eastern and Southern Europe, where it's not quite as popular as Western Europe.
It's not popular anywhere, but in Eastern and in Southeast Europe and in Eastern Europe, they've traditionally guarded the gates against Islam, and you're not going to get countries like.
Is that because they have a history of being dominated by Islam? Spain and Eastern Europe,
and Poland and Hungary, these countries know whereof they speak, and they're not going to do as they're told. And these are countries. This is why the EU is dying, because the countries that did best financially out of it, look, they're not going to survive without British money. Okay, they're not. We've always known we're the EU milk cow, and they're not going to survive. The hole left by our funding is going to require taxation on EU citizens, which will lead to riots. We are a major contributor Um, and the countries which have done best out of that financially are the Eastern European countries. I mean, about 20 cents out of every euro spent in the EU has gone to Poland, for instance. But don't tell Poland to take in a load of Muslims, because these are countries which know what it's like under Muslim domination. They guard the gates against Europe. Hungary, you know, President Orban, marvelous. He's absolutely brilliant. He's not going to let Hungary be overrun by Muslims, because these are the attack dogs of Christendom. These nations, you know, these Visigoth nations, they are the attack dogs. They will not let Islam in. And so the countries that would have staunchly defended the EU because, you know, on grounds of getting money from it, will not defend it because they're supposed to now be used as a dumping ground for mad Mother Merkel's experiment, you know. So it's on, you know, it's going to die. It's going to die a natural death. Those countries are staunchly Catholic, they are staunchly conservative, and they do not want Islam in there. And for very good reason. Why on earth would anybody want Islam in there? There is, you know, what doesn't give anything. It doesn't enrich cultures. It's an entirely negative sort of infestation. It's, you know, it doesn't help anybody. It doesn't do anything good for anybody. It's nothing but trouble. Why would somebody knowingly invite trouble into their country? You know.
I agree if you're talking about the ideology, but I was reading about recently. Tommy Robinson had a break with Majid Nawaz and Quillette because there was this reform Islam, and the argument is we can't reform Islam, we have to reform people.
That is the thing. Islam cannot be reformed, and this is the annoying thing is that the solution to the Islam problem is so very, very simple, and it just lies in nations enforcing their own laws. Just no ifs, buts, or maybes. Right, you live here, you obey our law, and I genuinely believe that most Muslims would love, you know, like especially ones who've been here, you know, a while, love the country that they live in more than they love the cult that they were born into, and so they would just prefer to assimilate, and they would do this, but because we have such a bunch of weirdos at the top, that is never given a chance.
Well, you said cult, and cult. See, I think a lot of people like the abandonment of religion in the West is something we're free to do, whereas under apostasy, there's a penalty for leaving, and so it's just like a cult, you cannot leave.
Yeah, they never acknowledge that anyone leaves. So when people say about there's 1.6 billion Muslims, that's not true. They never acknowledge anyone who leaves. You know, Christians, they have to personally attest to being Christians. I can't say that my children, you know, I've got 3 children, I can't sort of say, oh yeah, they're all Christians because I'm a Christian or whatever. I can't say that because that is down to them, but you know, that's their choice. That is not the case with Islam. Is, you know, do you know what, I'm say this, I get very, very bored with having to constantly consider a religion which has, as far as I can see, has never produced anything of any worth. It's destroyed much. I mean, the most enlightened areas of the world used to be the Middle East, but they were destroyed by Islam. You know, they were the seats of learning and science and medicine and reason and
during
logic.
The Dark Ages in Europe.
Yeah, they were destroyed by Islam. I get really, really sick of that. I get really because you should be striving for human excellence, and Islam destroys human excellence. They you know, they found here in Britain that Pakistani Muslims, most of them are horrendously inbred. 55% of Muslims marry their cousins. Now, their parents were always also cousins who married cousins, and their parents were cousins who married cousins, and blah blah blah, on back into whatever. You know, the result is they don't actually have a gene pool. They have a damp patch, and they are hideously inbred.
Do they have webbed feet?
Oh, very, very nearly, because less than 3.5% of births in Britain are from Pakistani Muslims, but 30% plus of birth defects are from Pakistani Muslims. These are hideously inbred, and that's the physical thing. Then you get into the insanity caused by inbreeding. It causes mental illness. And they hide that all behind religion. This is why they get to sort of 21 and suddenly go bananas, and start dressing as something else. Do you know, I'm going to put this out here, right? Because it's something I want to ask. Because America's home of the Amish. Why is it?
I know it's coming.
Are you thinking beards? Why is it that when people get religion, they decide, men suddenly think, hey, God loves me, I'm going to start styling myself like one of the 7 dwarfs. What is it with the beards? What's going on with the beards? What is it with the beards, right? Why do they think I've got God, so I'm going to grow a big beard? Why is it that the women who get excessively religious start leaving the tweezers on the bathroom shelf? Come on, deal with it, ladies. Looking as if a weasel crawled across your forehead and died is not a good look. God gave the skills that invented lipstick and mascara and tweezers. Use them. There is nothing wrong with looking sane.
Well, I was wrong. I thought you were going to say about the Amish. How come we don't have a problem with Amish terrorists when they're very religious?
Well, you see, the thing is, if someone... This is why, in many ways, I blame the government, or in most ways, because I hate my government. I blame them more than Muslims, because Muslims can't help themselves. They're just sort of doing their Muslim thing, right? But you imagine if you had a government which complied with Amish demanding that everyone wore a regulation floral headscarf and grew a mad shovel-shaped beard and read the Bible in German and travelled everywhere by horse and buggy. You imagine how we'd hate the Amish.
Forget about not using electricity too.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go into that. Electricity, phones, and everything, right? So you imagine. All right. Let's go back. Right. So we got the beards, the headscarves, the horse and buggy, the no electricity, no plucking the eyebrows.
No, it's a good tie-in. It's because they're very dedicated to their faith.
Yeah. But you imagine if this was forced on all of us. You imagine how much we'd hate the Amish. Whereas we actually, I have no particular. I just think you're a funny-looking load of buggers. Just get on with it. I don't care. But if they tried to force this on us, if you get minorities force their oddity on people, people will hate them. And this is and so
it's starting. It's been starting in Europe. So what is going to be the turning point? When you said that people have to demand things like their freedoms, is that what's going to happen? People are going to have to wake up and say,
I think we're already awake. I think we're already awake. I think we're awaiting now the final straw. I think that there will be a civil war to a degree in every country in Europe, because our governments are, instead of responding to what we want, and they know what we want, instead of responding to what we want, they're being more draconian. Like I say, Theresa May, her response to the latest lot of atrocities, has been, well, I'm going to crack down more on people complaining about it. This is insane, In the UK, people are seriously demanding a restitution of the right to bear arms. Um, it's outrageous that we have to face the presence in Britain alone. Think, you multiply this by 27 to get all of Europe. You have 20,000 known ISIS operatives walking free in Europe. We're not even allowed to show any anger about this. And when a British soldier was beheaded on the streets by Muslim savages, the government claimed there was a backlash because a woman said someone had pulled her veil off. You know, we are sacrificed. We take our lives in our hands on a daily basis. My daughter and her friends arrange their outings according to not being around on a Friday night, because that's when they'll all be, you know, worked up from Friday prayers. You know, that for what? You know,
that's why I wanted to talk to you, because you're impacted. I had a live chat with somebody that said that the issue is being blown out of proportion in the UK, and here's the irony, that's over-reported. And I want to just say something about, I keep seeing in America, every time there's a terrorist and it's Muslim, of course they say Allahu Akbar before they blow themselves up. But when there's a Christian terrorist, they don't report it. The thing is, there's very few, if any,
Christian terrorists.
Right.
I've read the Gospels.
They happen to be Christian, and they're insane. And
exactly.
Same with the Islamic terrorists. You have to be insane to blow yourself and other people up. You have to be insane. That's a given.
Also, look. Jesus was a poor young Jewish carpenter and existentialist. He wasn't a blood-soaked, mass-murdering, Dark Age warlord who has been proven by science to have gang raped people all over the Middle East. You know, you're not talking about the same kind of thing. You cannot compare Christianity and Islam.
What I meant to say is that this reaction, every time there's a Muslim terrorism act, the media, and I tell you what, I don't see, it's underreported. But on the far left, they say, oh yeah, every time. But the thing is, when they yell Allahu Akbar, that's kind of like, to me, I'm waiting to hear what happens whenever there's another terrorist attack. I wait until I find out who did it and why they did it. But we always discover with the Islamic terrorist attack, they say Allahu Akbar. They have a note in their Quran in the van that they ran into people saying they're going to do this. They were radicalized in Europe. They were radicalized in America. And when you have other people that are doing terrorist acts, they're not doing it in the name of Christianity.
It's
bad. They're equally bad, but there's on one side you have Islam is the driving force of terrorism in the West. On the other hand, it is for all mental illness.
Think about the hundreds of people who would still be alive, about the thousands of people who would not have been raped were there no Islam in Europe, in the West at all. If it was kept where it was, where they all actually care about these various dark age things that we don't give a toss about, if they were all stayed there and grumbled to each other and put bags on their heads and all the various oddities that they want to do, I don't care.
Or assimilated properly, right?
Yeah, but they won't assimilate. Islam doesn't assimilate, because Islam disappears if it assimilates, right? So I'm talking about the more realistic concept, which is, if they weren't here, there are people who are dead now who would be alive, who would have children and lives and all the rest of it, if it weren't for the fact that these weirdos had been imported. Just stay there, you know, just stay where everyone else agrees with you. You know, we've had freedom of movement for about 20 years in Europe, and what's happened is, in the main, if people like snowmen and schnitzels, they move northeast. If they like sunshine and speedos, they move southwest. This is the way of things. You move to where you want to be, where it most fits the thing that makes you happiest. If you are a Muslim, then it's surely not a good idea to move to Sweden, for instance. You know, um, just stay where you are and don't kill people. You know, so that people who don't believe in your nonsense don't get killed. But we have this thing. Like I say, I will say again to anyone who's interested: Google Barcelona 1995. We are being sacrificed. We are collateral damage. We take in Europe, we take our lives in our hands on a daily basis, and for what? It's an insane, unworkable agenda set by people who are safe behind bulletproof glass and armed guards. They have an agenda to apparently turn every city in Europe into Karachi, while living high on the hill, out of sight and sound of the misery. I don't think it's going to end well. Well, the only way it's going to end well is with a happy ending, which means that Islam and all who sail in it and support it shut their faces and go elsewhere, and we revert to being an enlightened society. I don't think it's going to work out that way, because there's too much power depends on it and too much money depends on it. But I do think we're almost at the stage of having nothing to lose. At the moment, we have no peace. We sit on a powder keg. I don't think it can be sorted out through democratic channels. I would love to think it does. It will. But I think that our governments have very little care for democracy. If they cared about democracy, they'd care more about pleasing the majority than they do the minority. As it is, they're pandering to a minority at the expense of the majority. This doesn't gel with people who think that democracy has a long lifespan. I have a suspicion that they plan to put democracy in the same incinerator as they put free speech. It won't work. They will be wiped out. If you think about think of Kennedy's words, you know, those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. We will end it. We will end it. You know, whatever happens, I'm a Brit. I live here. You know, I mentioned to you DNA testing and everything. I am DNA tested. I belong here. My family were here before the Ice Age. You know, I love my country. I want my country and my people and my culture to survive. I love Europe as well. That's why I hate the EU. I want them to survive. This will always only happen it will only happen in those countries that Europe has produced, i.e. America, Australia, New Zealand, all this. That will only happen. Our survival will only happen if we recognise that we have ultimate power. I love Orwell. When he was writing 1984, he wrote about the proles, the majority who'd been reduced to a subclass, and he said, if only they could somehow become conscious of their own strength, they needed only to rise up and shake themselves like a horse shaking off flies. And I hope this is what will happen in Britain and right across the free nations of Europe, where we're fighting for our lives. We have to rise up. We have to rise up. This has to be gone. It has to be, and our governments have to be afraid to disobey us. And I find it comforting to remember that 70 years of communist oppression was brought down in 10 months by unarmed people who rose up and shook themselves. And I hope the same will happen here. Because we need to save ourselves, because we're worth saving.
Well, when you mentioned DNA, I have the results of mine, and I'm half British ancestry, about a quarter Irish.
Same difference. A quarter of the Brits are Irish. You know, the Irish get around and they're ever so charming. You know, they could talk. They can they can talk you into anything.
Yeah. So, well, that's hey, we're ending it on a positive note that there is hope, and it could end badly, and it may end badly. But if the majority of the population is of one mind, then things can go in the way that's best for your country and for all the countries involved. Because I don't want to see Europe invaded by. I don't want to see America and Canada invaded by Muslims. And it's not, like we mentioned earlier, it's not the people, it's the ideology that we're against.
Yeah, the people are suffering as well. You gotta accept this, that there's people, Muslim people came to the West to enjoy the benefits of the West, and now find that they're dragged back down into what they hope to escape. And we have a duty to uphold values that have held true for centuries. We really do.
Well, how about if we end it there, and you hang on for a minute after we finish the live stream, so I can say a few things to you privately.
Sure. Okay.
So thank you very much for being on my YouTube channel, and I appreciate your honesty and speaking your mind. That's exactly what this channel is for, and I have people lined up to talk in the future that are completely opposed to what I think, but that's what free speech is about. I happen to agree with you. That's easy, but I'm going to have people on that I disagree with. But I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And do you want to say any last words before we turn it off?
I just remind young Americans, remember who you are. Remember who you are, and be apt representatives of the land of the free and the home of the brave. That's because that's the light of the world at the moment.